Welcome back to the channel. This will be my team selection for Gameweek 35. I only have one free transfer and no chips remaining. I used a free hit in Blank Gameweek 34 and I'll discuss my performance in the first part of this video and then move on to my transfer plans, my team selection and other tidbits like the prices, expected points and also a visualization of Gameweek 36, which could end up being a double game week, but as things stand, there are no confirmation or announcements about a double game week in 36 and of course the blank in 37, but we should get something before the deadline and it will be covered on this channel either in a future video or in the deadline stream tomorrow. If you want to see the best wildcard squad for Gameweek 35, then let me know down the comment section below and like this video, get it to over 100 likes and let's keep on pushing towards new goals. We are getting very close towards 33,000 subscribers and we're also on the cusp of 100 members on YouTube alone, and never mind the patrons we have as well. So thank you very much for your support, and to Napstars and Paredes for gifting multiple memberships in the recent deadline streams. You can see my FPL challenge team on screen, and this is from Gameweek 34 where I went for Jose Sarr, Ait Nouri, Salah as my captain and Isak, with one remaining player from the Thursday match between Nottingham Forest versus Brentford, and every single one of those players will have double the amount of points, and that's why I've gone for Mbumo in this setup, and I'll show you my FPL challenge team for Gameweek 35 in tomorrow's deadline stream. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. After activating the free hit for Blank Gameweek 34, I had high expectations for the game week, and whilst it's still not over yet, I have no players remaining. I didn't go for anybody from the Brentford Nottingham Forest match in my FPL team. Nick Pope was in goal, but there was a slight kind of concern and problem with this pick because it meant I had a high-scoring goalkeeper on my bench, and I also missed out on Kieran Trippier's 15-pointer with 2 assists on top of the clean sheet and bonus points. So if I'd gone for that sort of direction instead, I would have gained significantly more points in the process and reached 100 plus. But in the end, it was still a good goalkeeper pick, and I always backed Newcastle to be one of the best teams for a clean sheet in Gameweek 34. And that's my defensive line. It was very solid on the whole. Trent Alexander-Arnold gained 3 points over Virgil van Dijk in that 5-1 win over Tottenham Hotspur to secure the Premier League title, and both Sessegnon and Ait Nouri got 11 pointers, with Sessegnon scoring in the 94th minute to win the game there for Fulham, and Ait Nouri got an assist, a few bonus points and a clean sheet in a standard professional 3-0 win over Leicester. Now in the midfield, I also had Salah as my captain. Luis Diaz scored the opening goal there, and Salah got in late on the action, and I think they gave him a bonus point a day after, but of course the bonus points are still subject to change, so don't be surprised if you see a few modifications to your scoreline and the rank by the end of the Thursday. Jacob Murphy got an assist by winning a penalty there for Newcastle, so he gained 3 points over Harvey Barnes. The only disappointment in this position was Cole Palmer, who blanked once more in a 1-0 win over Everton, which is one of the few predictions I got spot on entirely in terms of the result. But I think Cole Palmer has just been an awful FPL asset for some time now. 17 consecutive games without a goal or assist. I do cover him in my Transfer Tips podcast, and I sold him quite a while ago, but I thought on the free hit he could do very well. He scored 4 goals against Everton this time last year, but the form and also the way Chelsea are playing at the moment compared to at the end of last season, it's completely different, and Palmer is a shadow of himself, but I do think he can bounce back and still end this season very strongly. Now, as for my forward line, the biggest disappointment of my entire team was Raul Jimenez getting booked and also missing a big chance against Southampton. I think he had 6 shots overall against the Saints, but he was an awful pick in the end. But both Isak and Cunha did the business, especially the Brazilian, with 1 goal and 2 assists and maximum bonus points. That's 41 for the season, so he is absolutely outstanding and the definition of a talismanic figure. But Isak was slightly disappointing, I would have to say, because he only scored a penalty and Newcastle won quite comfortably once more, so he isn't in the best of form. And by going for Salah over Isak, I gained 2 points with the captaincy because I was very tempted to go for Alexander Isak, who scored a hat-trick against Ipswich Town earlier this season. As for my bench, there were some big headaches and frustrations from the Saturday, with Jose Sarr saving a penalty after conceding it himself, obviously getting the clean sheet against Leicester and delivering 12 points, which is a mammoth return for a goalkeeper, and Cucurella kept the clean sheet. So I was fearing the worst there, but both Cliver and Kirkes blanked in that 1-1 draw against Man United. So on the whole, I'm very happy with my performance, despite the fact that going for Jose Sarr over Pope and then going for Trippier in that defensive line and maybe going for a back four, that would have been perfect this week. But ultimately, I'm kind of nitpicking because apart from Jimenez and Palmer, everyone else returned in my starting 11, and that has meant 87 points for Blank Gameweek 34 and a significant green arrow to 122k in the world. But that will go down a little bit, maybe even significantly, if Visser, Chris Wood and Mbeumo do the business. Those three are the main targets and also threats to my rank. So I'm hoping that they do blank, or at least don't go off on an absolute mad one, but they are quality players and I'm backing a 1-1 draw in that particular match, and we'll see how that transpires. But let's discuss the prices before talking about my transfer plans. And not much has changed recently, and I would encourage everybody watching to not make any moves until we get confirmation of Double Gameweek Phase 6 or lack thereof, and also because we have the Thursday matches in the Conference League and the Europa League. So make your transfers tomorrow on the Friday, and ideally that would be during the deadline stream. Now, there is still a possibility that the announcement doesn't happen before the Gameweek 35 deadline, but knowing how FPL can be, it wouldn't surprise me if we get an announcement basically as I'm recording or straight after I do so. It's going to be very difficult, of course, to keep that in mind, but I will be covering it on my channel, like I said in a video or in tomorrow's deadline stream. And if you want to see the best wildcard squad, then let me know down in the comment section below. But there's only one transfer that really stands out to me this week as things stand, and that could definitely change based on an announcement. But Saka to Mbeumo looks very promising. I think Saka could start against Bournemouth, by the way, but with the Gunners down in the Champions League by 1-0 on the aggregate scoreline, I think they could rest some players, or in the case of Saka, sob him out quite early on, and Mbeumo will have his full focus on the Premier League, and he's also got a much better fixture on paper against Man United at home compared to Saka facing Bournemouth. But I think if Saka gets 70 plus minutes, he is actually right up there for the captaincy, but I'd still rank Mbeumo even higher this week, and he's also got better fixtures from now until the end of the season. For example, in Gameweek Phase 6, Arsenal play Liverpool away, whilst Brentford have Ipswich Town away from home. So I think Mbeumo is captainable, not just against Man United, but also in Gameweek 36, and that's why he's a standout midfielder for me, and the only route to go to him is by selling Saka. If I could keep the Arsenal talisman and also buy Mbeumo simultaneously, I'd probably do so, to be fair. And the same goes for if I had 2 free transfers, and I'd easily buy Mbeumo for Saka and then use those extra funds to upgrade one of Murphy or Ismaila Sarr to Jared Bowen, for example. But for a -4 hit, that is probably pushing it slightly, and that's why my current plan is to make 1 free transfer and buy Bryan Mbeumo for Gameweek 36. So with that in mind, this is my Gameweek 35 provisional team selection, and we'll see how everything pans out. It isn't locked in, but David Raya in goal against Bournemouth isn't great, but my alternative is Verbruggen facing Newcastle at home, and I'd rather go for the Spaniard. Now, earlier this season, Brighton kept a clean sheet away from home at St James's Park, and that could obviously bode well for Verbruggen, but I think the Toon will score this time round, and they're in excellent form since winning the Carabao Cup final, and Brighton have been all over the place. They had a very good streak not so long ago, winning 7 games consecutively, but ever since that, they've been very inconsistent, and I do think Newcastle can put several goals past them. Whilst with Arsenal-Bournemouth, despite the concerns you may have about the Gunners and their rotation, a lot of us would still back Arsenal to keep a clean sheet, and in the odds, they are ranked quite highly, as I'll show you in the deadline stream tomorrow. Now, with my defensive line, it isn't looking particularly great, but I'm looking to start Munoz, Milenkovic and Gavardio, and I mean Saliba and Livramento on my bench. And whilst I could go all in on that Arsenal defence and hope that they keep a clean sheet, I don't think they will do so against Bournemouth. And I think Milenkovic is a better pick this week, and you've also got Munoz for the attacking potential against Nottingham Forest. You could say the same thing about Gavardio if he plays as a left-back, but that probably won't be the case. We have seen him start in that centre-half position in many games recently, and I bought him on the Gameweek Fay wildcard. He has been a good acquisition on the whole, but there have been some recent blanks there, and Man City just aren't that same team as they were in previous seasons with that control of the midfield and also protection for that defence, but they have shown more consistency recently, and they are scoring goals and winning matches. They are through to the FA Cup final, and they are massive favourites against Crystal Palace, and Gavardio scored against Nottingham Forest in that FA Cup semi-final, and even from set pieces he can deliver on the big occasions. Now, looking at my midfield, I'm also fairly happy with it, but it isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I've got Rodgers and Jacob Murphy both in that starting 11, whilst Ismaila Sarr is on my bench, and that could be a slight cause for concern. I'm also selling Saka for Mbeumo, which looks good on paper, but it's still a risk if Saka gets those minutes, and my prediction is that he will start the game, but be subbed off around 60-70 minutes, depending on game state, and ultimately Arsenal's priority is the Champions League. That's the only competition they can still win, and in the Premier League, they're only fighting for second place, and I do think the top 5 is more than secured. Now, Mohamed Salah is also in this team, facing Chelsea away, and whilst his record against the top 6 is very good, and I say top 6, the big 6 clubs, even though some of them are nowhere near that in the standings, but away from home against Chelsea, he doesn't have the greatest of records at Stamford Bridge, his former stomping ground, if you will. But I do think Salah is still a contender for the captaincy, but unlike most weeks, I don't think he'll get the final armband. And looking at my forwards, I'm also fairly happy with this, with Mateta, Isak, and Marmoush, who are all captainable this week, particularly in the case of Isak and the Egyptian striker. And I think those two would rank higher than Mohamed Salah this week, and even Bryan Mbeumo, dare I say. Now, looking at my bench as well, it looks fairly decent, and it could get 10 to 15 points, which I hope isn't the case. But I've got Verbruggen at home to Newcastle, Ismaila Sarr facing Nottingham Forest at home, Saliba at home to Bournemouth, and Livramento away to Brighton. I don't see myself changing the order of that bench, but I might introduce Sarr into that 11 for one of Rodgers or Jacob Murphy. I think the rest pretty much speaks for itself, and the captaincy is the only thing left to really discuss with my Gameweek 35 squad. And Bryan Mbeumo is my current front runner against the struggling Man United side, and Marmoush is my vice captain. But I'm also considering Isak because Brighton have conceded 11 goals in the last 4 matches in the Premier League. So those 3 are the front runners, and one of them will probably take my captaincy by the end. If I end up keeping Saka and I'm more confident about his minutes, he could also be a front runner for the captaincy. So ideally, I'd keep Saka and buy Mbeumo, but that really isn't possible unless I want to sell Mohamed Salah instead. And whilst that could be good for Gameweek 35, I'm not so sure about that for the rest of the season, and I do back Salah to do well against Arsenal in Gameweek 36, not to mention the remaining fixtures like Crystal Palace at home in Gameweek 38. So before I go to fpl.team and show you a visualization of Gameweek 36 as things stand, let me show you expected points. And David Raya has 4.4, which is very high for a goalkeeper. Munoz, Milenkovic and Gvardiol have decent numbers, but the likes of Saliba have higher expected points figures than Milenkovic. So Fantasy Football Hub are recommending starting Saliba instead, but I'm trying to diversify my defence a little bit, so that's why I've gone for Milenkovic there. Rodgers, Mbeumo, Murphy and Salah, all pretty standard, but Murphy's is quite low actually, so they're recommending Sarr over Murphy in that 11. Let me know your thoughts down the comment section below. Mateta, Isak and Marmoush all have very good numbers there with the expected points, and I don't see any of them dropping to the bench, despite the fact that Mateta only has 1 goal against Nottingham Forest in his entire career. Verbruggen has a decent number, by the way, 3.3 expected points. Sarr, of course, not so far off 5 expected points. Saliba, 4.3, and Livramento is by far the lowest, and I don't see myself starting him. If this fixture was at St James's Park, that would be a different story, and to be fair, their defensive numbers have been solid recently, so that isn't a terrible pick actually, and it could be a nice differential, but I think that defensive line is fairly locked in. It's just about that choice of the midfielder, and also, do I sell Saka or keep him for at least 1 more week? The biggest concern for me is that if we get a double Gameweek in phase 6, the blank in phase 7 might be very difficult to navigate without the free hit or multiple free transfers. So just for those that aren't aware, I did read out an update and we did see what Ben Crellin said on Twitter, and I did read out the possible double Gameweeks and also the current situation. So this is what he said on Twitter. Man City versus Bournemouth and Palace versus Wolves will have to move from the weekend of Gameweek phase 7 to either the midweek in Gameweek phase 6 or the midweek in Gameweek phase 7, and the midweek in phase 7 is probably more likely. Spurs have requested that Villa versus Spurs be moved from the weekend of Gameweek phase 7 to the midweek in Gameweek phase 6, so they do not have to play the game on the Sunday before a potential Europa League final on the Wednesday. Now, Chelsea versus Man United is already scheduled for the Friday before the Europa League final, so that fixture won't need to move. Now, the possible double Gameweek phase 6 fixtures include Spurs, who would face Crystal Palace at home and Aston Villa away. Aston Villa would face Bournemouth at home and Tottenham at home. Man City would face Southampton away and then possibly Bournemouth at home. Bournemouth would then face Aston Villa at home and Man City away. Crystal Palace would face Spurs away, and then possibly Wolves at home, and Wolves would face Brighton at home, and Crystal Palace away. And Ben Crellin also said we're likely to get that confirmation of whether those 3 fixtures will move to Gameweek 36 or stay in 37 before the Gameweek 35 deadline. So it's very important to keep your transfers and wait for that information. And a few days ago, John Townley, a reporter, did state that Aston Villa have written to the Premier League to emphatically reject Tottenham's request to bring forward their fixture at Villa Park next month. Understand that Spurs wanted a game to be played on Thursday the 15th of May to allow more time to prepare for a possible Europa League final. And to be fair, he said next month because that was written towards the end of April. So it is this month, just to clarify that. But it does look like the Premier League will side with Aston Villa. That is my current prediction, but who knows? They can make some funny decisions at times. And ultimately, I understand both sides of the argument. But what you see on screen is my provisional Blank Gameweek 37 squad, which isn't looking too great anyway because I've got 3 Newcastle up against 3 Arsenal. So I've got Raya, Saliba, and I had Saka to be fair, but I could sell him to Mbeumo, and that would obviously trim it down a little bit. And I'd have Mbeumo at home to Fulham, which looks maybe a little bit more appealing based on the fixture. But I still have 5 players involved from that match as things stand, with Livramento, Murphy, and Isak. Milenkovic would face West Ham away. Munoz, Sarr and Mateta would face Wolves at home, but maybe they will double in 36, and if that's the case, it would be yet another set of blankers for 37, and that could also be on top of Rodgers, Marmoush and Gvardiol, but that isn't set in stone. I have to repeat that. These are just projections at the moment on the website fpl.team, and I've got Verbruggen on my bench facing Liverpool at home. For Gameweek 36, it doesn't look as bad, of course, because it could be a double gameweek in the end, and blanks are always more difficult to navigate. But I could have Verbruggen away to Wolves, and I'd rather start him over Raya, who would face Liverpool away. Saliba would also be on my bench as a result, and I've got Milenkovic at home to Leicester in Gameweek 36. Gvardiol could face Southampton away and Bournemouth at home at the same time, but if the double doesn't happen, then it's just Southampton away, which is already very appealing. Livramento at home to Chelsea is in my provisional Gameweek 36 starting lineup, and I've got Rodgers who could face Bournemouth away and Tottenham at home, but I'll be honest, I think it's more likely that we see a single game week there for Aston Villa. Murphy and Isak also face Chelsea at home. I've got Mbeumo away to Ipswich Town if I bring him in before the Gameweek 35 deadline. Salah at home to Arsenal would still be a front runner for the captaincy. Marmoush would be a standout captaincy option regardless, facing Southampton away, and with a double game week, that only intensifies even further. And I've also got Mateta facing Tottenham away in that starting 11 with Sarr and Munoz on the bench. So that's how things look like at the moment with the information we currently have. And for Blank Gameweek 37 and Double Gameweek 36, that's how my team would look like. And I'll talk more about Gameweek 38 as we approach that time frame. But my main focus is on the next 3 game weeks in particular and taking it one step at a time. But that's really the biggest challenge I face this season. How do I navigate the double in 36 if it happens, and those same teams will then blank in 37 without the free hit and also with limited amount of transfers? And I think a lot of you will also be in the same boat, but all your questions will be answered in the deadline stream on Friday, and be sure not to be caught out by that early deadline. And also any single comment and everything you need to know with team news, injury updates, suspensions and form, all of that will be here on this channel. That concludes the team selection for Gameweek 35 in FPL. I only have 1 free transfer and no chips remaining, so it would make any potential double and blank very difficult to manage, but it's still possible and doable, and I think we can definitely navigate this last part of the season very efficiently to then get to the ranks and also mini league standings that we want. Thank you very much to everyone who has been tuning in to every single video and live stream for both UCL Fantasy and FPL. If you enjoyed this one or found it useful, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so no miss a single upload or live stream for both UCL Fantasy and FPL. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, for links to my videos, prior to reply to comments in the live streams and videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you on Friday for another deadline stream, and keep your eyes peeled for more UCL Fantasy content for the second leg of the Champions League semi-finals.